So I only have a short amount of time, and I wanted to talk, when I heard the title of the Northeast Collaborative, there's so many things that I want to share and could share about so many things that I'm passionate about, not only the city, but specifically Northeast Oklahoma City. I went to Millwood. Falcon, come on. Either you hate us or you love us, but you've got some feeling about us, right? That's right. You don't have to share it out loud, but I know. So I grew up Northeast Oklahoma City. My grandmother still lives in Garden Oaks. She is 94 years old. My dad still lives Northeast. I still live Northeast. So if we want to go back to car seats, I've always cared about Northeast Oklahoma City. I just didn't know I cared about it until about 1987 or so when I went, what's going on? Right. So I've been with the police department for 20 plus years. And if you know anything about law enforcement, we can retire at 20 years. So you guys don't have to clap. I can just retire. It's okay. I'm just one bad day away from retirement. So really, so I want to talk a little bit about what my experiences led me down a path of training at the police department, mentoring youth, and just kind of really briefly talk about one of the most recent trainings that we have and how it might affect us that care about a particular side of town, how we might engage and think about ourselves and our own thinking and our own perceptions of people. And we've done implicit bias at our police department recently, and this is several years ago now, probably 3 years ago now, that we trained the entire police department on implicit bias. But prior to that, we did things like diversity training, cultural diversity. We did all kinds of things to try to stay ahead because that's what we do. We work in diverse communities. And in various degrees it works for a little bit, but when we stumbled across implicit bias, it really made me kind of think about where I was personally about my assumptions about people and how I did my work in service to the community. So the way we introduced it, we could not say to a group of police officers who is primarily white males, right? And if we said we're going to have implicit bias training, they were going to go, here we go again, more diversity, culture training, all that stuff. So what they did is they called it fair and impartial policing. And inside of fair and impartial policing, which treat everybody right, fair, and impartially, inside of that was the implicit bias training, and working with communities of color, specifically African American community. So today I want to share with you some highlights from that training and my experience in this journey of culture, diversity, and inclusion. So this will only be highlights. This is really supposed to be a discussion, right? But we won't go there. I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit about my journey in this. And when I first was introduced to this training and became interested in doing it was because I was invited after Ferguson, after Mike Brown, I was invited to speak at a small gathering of people. I was invited, can you come and just share about what you think is going on in Ferguson? You know, could that riot thing happen in Oklahoma City? I mean, this was really surprising to many of us here in Oklahoma City, and we just wanted to know if it happened in America, in that little small town, could it happen in Oklahoma City? And I said, sure, it could happen in Oklahoma City. Well, come and talk to us about it. So I agreed to talk to him about it, but I didn't realize that I was talking at a thing called Q Commons, which is the Christian version of a TED Talk. So this little talk was for 400 people and needed to be only 9 minutes, right, on the clock. And I was like, oh, that's too big of a topic. My opinion is way too vast. I don't want to share my opinion with that many people, but I couldn't talk my way out of it. And so I ended up sharing for 9 minutes on Lieutenant Cubit's response to Ferguson. And in that talk, I said several things, but one of the things that I wish I could just take back was I called the rioters of Ferguson thugs and lawless thugs. And I stood by that. I didn't hold any punches because as a career law enforcement official, I am sworn to protect lives and property. And what I was seeing and what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and my immediate assumption was that these are lawless people because they don't care about other people's property and things. And I went on to believe that. And then I read the Department of Justice report on Ferguson. And I was like, my God, there has been years and years of oppression from city and local government on a small group of people in that one town. Years of systematic oppression. And just a few months ago, I called them thugs. Lawlessness. Oh well, can't get that one back. I threw that one out. And then I'm sitting there babysitting my grandkids alone. Shouldn't happen, right? But I am left alone for a short period of time with my grandson, who's about 5, 6, and my granddaughter, who is 1, 2-ish, just starting to talk. And I'm feeding them. He's at the toddler table. She's in the high chair. I have my big screen on, and I'm watching ESPN. And I'm eating. They're eating, and she's mumbling something that I can't really understand what she's saying. But you got your food, you got your drink, you got your silverware. He's good. And I see on the panel of ESPN was that my story about the Dallas Cowboys was coming up any minute, right? And so you're eating, we're fine. What do you want? What is it you want? And she keeps mumbling, and she gets a little bit more agitated. Agitated. Calm down, chill out. My story's coming. Everybody's good. And just before my story comes on, she throws her plate on the floor. And of course, that disrupts everything. She's kicking, screaming, she's crying. I'm pointing my finger and I'm telling her how wrong she is, and I'm giving it to her. And I'm talking, okay, what is it that you want? What is it that you want? And when I slowed down to pay attention to what she was trying to say, was what she was trying to tell me is that I gave her the Spider-Man cup, not the Frozen cup that's hers. Right? The Spider cup was his, the Frozen cup was hers. And when I slowed down, this was a very easy fix. The Frozen cup, I should have known better, right? But I wasn't paying attention. I was into what I was doing. ESPN, eating my own food. My story is coming up. But until she threw a little riot and diverted my attention to what was important to the service that I was supposed to be giving her, things changed, right? And it made me think about, I still don't agree with destruction of property, but I do agree with how we can pay attention to the people we want to serve. It could be as simple as a Frozen cup, right? For years and years and years, if you look at this report, the community of Ferguson was saying, look, hello, stop, I want, can you, please? And over and over and again, it was rejected and dismissed. And the opportunity of leadership to serve those people was missed until they made a mess on the floor. And I don't think that we need to wait till a mess is created before we can serve better, when all it requires is a little bit of listening. So that's one of the things that that said, man, I need to start taking a bigger look at how I serve people. What is always good for me is not always good for the people that live there, right? And I have many stories of what that helped me figure that out. The next thing that we had to do in the fair and impartial policing was we had to say, not only do you have these implicit biases, and implicit bias, we gave this definition. Bias first and then implicit bias. We said a tendency to believe that some people's ideas are better than others that usually results in treating people unfairly. An attitude of the mind that predisposes one to favor something else. That's bias. And we kind of know we have those. But the implicit bias, it refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, decisions in an unconscious manner. Those things that happen underneath the surface that affect the way we maneuver, treat people, talk to people, handle things. And we set this up by saying, we're not just talking about race. This could be age. This could be religion, male, female, sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. We all come to these automatic assumptions about people automatically, and we start operating in those automatic assumptions, hoping that we get it right. But what if we get it wrong? Many professions, if you get it wrong, you never know you got it wrong. But in my profession, we get it wrong, the whole world knows we got it wrong. Right? Starbucks, the whole world knows now. Delta Airlines, the whole world knows now. But so what we wanted to do is kind of address that. And one of the ways we did that to disarm them a little bit was we played the video of Susan Boyle from America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent or whatever. And here's this homely looking lady walks out. Her hair is her dress is all of this stuff, and everybody is laughing, already ready to get her off the stage. This has got to be the joke of the show. And when she opens up her mouth, this beautiful sound comes out, and everybody is wowed. She goes on to win the talent show. And we go, what was your automatic assumption about her, and why was it? And was it fair? What did she do to deserve your assumption about her? It was, well, she was a little too old. Maybe not, she won. Well, she was from a weird place. Maybe not, she won. Right? She described the place she comes. It's just a collection of hooligans is where I'm from. But she won. But nobody would have given her a chance based on their automatic assumption. And so now we have a whole bunch of officers going, yeah, okay, well, I might have done that. Yeah, you did it. Just like everybody else did it. And so what we said was that since you have that automatic assumption thing going on, I want you to look at your brain kind of like I look at my cell phone. I was playing golf with a buddy, and he had this joke on his phone that he wanted me to read. I won't tell the joke. But he wanted me to read, and he shares it with me, and I read it, and then after I got through looking at it, the font on his text was huge in compared to mine. And I'm like, that's a funny joke, but how did you get your text so big? And he says, I don't know. You just go into settings, swipe, 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 swipe. Default settings change, blah, 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 and he blows it up to whatever size he wants. And I went, that's exactly how our implicit biases are. We don't know how they got our beliefs and behavior got into our brain. We just start operating the way it is. Just like you take out your phone, it just starts doing. Somebody else set that up. You don't know how it got that way. But you can, once you identify the setting, you can change it if you want to. It's kind of like breathing. It's happening whether you want it to or not, but you can control it if you want it to. If you actually think about it, you can control it. And so when we set the tone like that, is that every last one of us have some default settings that maybe we want to keep and some that maybe we want to challenge a little bit. The thing that we learned is that just like our brain, just like the phone, when it experiences we got too many windows operating, too many things going at one time, it locks up. And what happens? It goes directly back to the default setting. That's okay when it does that, because we identify, the settings changed. I don't want that. I know how to go back to the way I want it. You can immediately catch it and change it before it affects somebody's life, right? So the last story I'll share with you is in our fair and impartial policing that's really set the scope for working in Northeast Oklahoma City and other communities of color, is we said we as police officers have to own the police officers of the past actions, right? You didn't do anything to that community, we know. But people that wear the uniform that you wear did. And they did it in the name of justice. And people remember that. That was 40, 50, 60 years ago. Why are we still being trapped by that? I understand that feeling. I understand that comment. But my grandmother, who I told you, 94 years old, she is the pillar of our family. And I got to tell you, she's not Jesus, but she's close in our family, right? She's everything. And so she tells stories all the time. And she told this story probably twice. I've probably told it 50 times now. But it does serve the point. She said in 1942, she gave birth to my mother. Her husband came home from the service for the birth, and he went back to where he was stationed in Sturgis, Kentucky. And at 3 months old, she decided she was going to go, her and the new baby were going to go visit him in Sturgis, Kentucky by way of Greyhound bus. Her mother and her mother-in-law had to save the money for her to get the bus ticket. They get the bus ticket. She goes down to the Greyhound bus. She gets on. She gathers her baby and her things, and she sits down in her seat. She says about midway the bus. As she gets situated, a white lady comes to her, stands over her, and says, "Ma'am, I need that seat." She said, "Well, I had just got situated, and I wasn't giving that lady my seat." They said, "There's other seats. You can go find another place to sit." Well, the lady said, "No, you need to get up and give me your seat." My grandmother said, "I was just not going to put up with it," and so I decided I wasn't going to move. She said the lady went and got the bus driver, and the bus driver came back in his uniform, and he stood beside me, and I can feel him as he stood there. And I looked out the window at my mother and my mother-in-law, and I can see they could tell something was about to happen on the bus. And he said, "Ma'am, if you don't give up your seat, I'm going to make you get off the bus." And she said, "And I didn't want to do that because I know how hard they work to get the money for the bus ticket, so I just got up. I didn't fight. I didn't do anything. I just got up." The lady took my seat, and she said, "And I stood in the aisle of that bus from Guthrie, Oklahoma to Chicago, Illinois for 6 hours." She said it was hard to handle my baby. It was difficult. And she said about Chicago, somewhere about Chicago, she said this a white lady in front of the bus saw I was having a hard time handling my baby, so she offered to take my baby and feed her for me. I was scared to death, but I didn't know what else to do. So I let the lady hold my baby. She said she went on, she got a seat at the next stop, and she made it on to Sturgis, Kentucky. Didn't think much of that the first couple of times I heard that story. 10 years ago, I'm on a Delta airline flight, sitting there in my seat, minding my business, and I see this white lady walking down the aisle. She looks at me, she looks at her ticket, she looks at me, she looks at her ticket, and I start getting stiff neck, sweaty palms. I'm getting ready. She goes to the flight attendant, and I see her show her ticket to the flight attendant, and the flight attendant points back toward my direction. I'm thinking, ain't going down like that, lady. I know what you're thinking, but I'm educated. This ain't 1960. I'm a police officer. You better find you a place to sit. This ain't what you want. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm feeling. I'm getting ready for the confrontation. And she makes her way back to me, and she asks for my ticket and says, "You damn right. Here's my ticket. I got one." And she says, "Oh, sir, you're just one row off." I was wrong. I was just one row off. But I'm sitting there. If I calm down and I just try to realize this anger, this frustration I'm feeling has nothing to do with me and this lady. It has everything to do with what happened in 1942. And I wasn't even born. The residue of my grandmother's pain still lives within me, and it still exists in this community right now. Right now. And if we don't respect that and own that, how are we ever going to bring trust and legitimacy to the work that we do every single day? By saying, I know what you may be feeling and experiencing, even though you can't identify it, but I'm going to show you something that contradicts what you think and let you decide for yourself whether this is true trust and whether I'm worth being trustworthy, worth being trusted, and that what I do is a legitimate cause. Right? And so there's two questions I got to answer because I know that they're in your mind. It always comes up when I speak. Did you always want to be a police officer? Is one. And then recently, what do you make of this Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter thing? Well, yes, I've always wanted to be a police officer since I was about 12 years old. And that came for, and I don't think I wanted to be a police officer. I think I wanted to be a marshal or a sheriff, right? Because I watched a lot of Westerns. I watched a lot of Westerns growing up. And so in one of those Westerns, I don't know which one it was, but I remember everybody in the small town doing their own thing, playing at the saloon, and the feed store, the general store, the hotel, the post office. Everybody was doing their thing. And some guy stumbles out of the saloon into the street, and he looks out into the neighborhood, and he sees some smoke. And that smoke indicates something's on fire. And he says, "Fire! Fire!" And everybody in town drops what they're doing, and they all run into the street. Right? And you got to think, they're all thinking, that's got to be my barn or my house. That's the reason for the urgency, right? And so everybody runs out to the direction, and they're all thinking, is that my barn? Is that my house? Is that my ranch? Is that my property? Right? And they get to their first stop. It's not mine. But they keep going. It's not mine. And they keep going until they reach the source of the fire. And once they see the source of the fire, no matter whose house it was, no matter whose barn it was, they would form a line all the way back to the source of the water back in town. And they would form a bucket brigade, and they would dip it in the water, and they would pass the buckets down one to another until they put out the fire. And the reason I tell you that story is because I feel like all lives matter, blue lives matter, black lives matter. It really is which ones are on fire, right? Every barn, every ranch was important, but there was only one on fire. And the community took it upon themselves to form shoulder to shoulder, back to back, to put out that fire, to put out that injustice or whatever was going on until it didn't exist anymore. And after the fire was out, everybody in the community did whatever they could to restore justice to the burnt property. I have lumber. I have feed. I have a place for you to sleep. I have something to give you until we can get this back to where it's functional again. So it's equal to everything else in this community. And so this is just a little bit of my journey in serving this community and hoping that we all can find our place in the bucket brigade. That we all don't get tired of passing buckets. And that we all put our assumptions about one another to the side and just examine what we automatically think about one another and whether or not it's fair, whether or not we need to adjust our setting. So I appreciate the work that you do. I appreciate being invited to this group, and let's get to work.